Okay, welcome back. Now, in this chapter, we're going to get into a close look at the primary controls available to you for this freshly created audio track. And obviously, we've bounced back into one of the Alan Morgan projects, the Vegas, What Happens in Vegas. I think his is just called Vegas. The one we're using is called What Happens in Vegas. And the good news here is you're going to get a 3 for the price of 1 or 4 for the price of 1 special, because everything that we're going to talk about in regards to controlling your audio track applies equally to your other big 3 creative tracks, the MIDI track, sampler track, and instrument track. And actually, let me clarify what I mean by that. I'm going to come over here to the track inspector, and I'm going to right click, and that's going to call up the add track dialogues. Now, I think there's 15 of these things altogether, but the top 4, audio, instrument, MIDI, and sampler, these are your primary, what I would call creative tracks or content tracks. I mean, the vast majority of what you're actually creating in Cubase is going to consist of one of these 4 types. And then the others are primarily utility tracks, the effects, group, folders, rulers. Those are tools that help you control your project and organize things and so forth, but they don't really contain artistic content. I guess the chord track does, and the arranger track does, but only by acting on material in one of those other 4 chord types, or track types. So these top 4 tracks are really your content or creative tracks, and the channel settings editor that we're going to look at in this video applies equally to all 4 of those. But let's step back in time for just a second. If you're like most of us, I think that when we all got into this game, it was because of this guy, right? This massive, awesome mixing board, right? This has been the center of gravity for every studio worth its salt since the beginning of time. And they look massive and impressive and a little intimidating too. But really, when you break it down, even this, which is I think that's a Solid State Logic 4000, is actually a pretty simple creature. It's big and it's precise, but if you start stripping it down, what you're really looking at there is a vast array of this creature over and over again. This is what's known as a channel strip. And moving from the bottom to the top, still has an ocean of buttons, but it really only does 4 things. And that's volume, routing, EQ, and effects. And that can be said of any channel strip out there. And in fact, to strip this down one more level, picture an old 1970s Buick with an AM radio. You have basically these same functions, right? You've got a volume knob, routing, which can be as simple as the pan control left and right. EQ is nothing more than elaborate tone control, right? I mean, there was always that big silver tone as treble or bass. The only thing that the 77 Dodge didn't have was an effects section. Now, these are much more sophisticated, much more precise, but at its core, it's really just those 4 fundamental functions. So you already know this. All you need to do is translate those concepts into the specific controls presented in front of you. And the really cool part here is this ocean of knobs and buttons, all of this super precise stuff. Not only are you going to get to use it, you own it, because this comes in Cubase. It's a virtual version, of course, but it's all there. And that's primarily in the form of this guy, the channel settings editor. And we've looked at him twice already. This is what pops up when you click the little lowercase e. And this is a central control panel for whatever track you're working on at the time. Now, you can get to this middle section called the channel strip 2 different ways. This is the easiest way, I think, by far, because you're getting all the controls in one compact presentation for just the track you're working on. But if you want to see these in such a way that they look like that solid state logic board, you can do that too by opening up the associated racks. And we'll talk about how to do that towards the end of the video. Okay, so we're back into our project window here, and we're going to pick on this audio track, the electric guitar, power guitar here. And I've got the solo button to press. That's the red button that's going to isolate just this track, so that when I start playback, we're going to hear that and only that. Okay. And to open the channel settings editor, I'm just going to click the E associated with that track, and here's the guy we were just looking at. Now, again, we get into all of the various functions of this in depth in our complete Cubase video series. I just want to point you around the real estate here so that you can find your way and begin exploring. Essentially working from left to right, what we're looking at here is all the controls associated with the currently selected track. So if we want to set up insert effects, if you wanted to And we'll talk about effects in 2 more chapters. But effects can be used 1 of 2 different ways. You can plug them in line like a guitar stomp box. That's called an insert. Or you can have a send effect, which is sort of like the reverb in the rack that everybody dips into. But if you've got insert effects here, there's a tab for that. And then you've got the strip tab duplicates all of these functions, right? So there's half a dozen different things here, from a noise gate, compressor limiter. You've got your EQ, some tools, which in the light version is just an envelope shaper, then some distortion and compression or limiters at the end. So you see gate, comp, EQ, etc. Look across the middle, gate, comp, EQ, etc. Because this strip and this strip are the same. 2 different ways to get to it. Why? Because most of the time you're probably going to have the center section here set up for your EQ, and you can still control the different strip functions while looking at how they're impacting the equalization curve. And then over here you've got destinations, and this is if you want to set up send effects. Like I said, we're getting to that on down the road. Very quickly, again, there's an entire chapter in Cubase Complete about how to use EQ, but equalization, like I said, is just elaborate tone control. Everybody, I think, has seen a graphic EQ. If you've walked through a Best Buy, you've seen it with all the different frequencies on different knobs or different sliders. This is a parametric equalizer, meaning you've got a low, low mid, and high frequency, and you can adjust 3 parameters. How much that frequency range is boost or cut, right? That's the gain. Which frequency you're boosting and cutting, which is dragging it left to right, and that's from lower tones to higher tones. And then the Q, which is the steepness of the curve. And what I'm going to do here, I'm doing this all with the mouse, obviously. If I take this node and I hold down the shift key on the computer, now when I drag vertically, instead of changing the gain, it changes the Q, right? And what I want you to do is look at those 3 parameters down below here. You've got the gain, the frequency, and the Q factor down here. So I'm going to move this around and watch those at the bottom. You see the bar is changing. Same thing, I can take the bar down here and I can manipulate it that way. You could also, if I have something very specific that I want to type in here, I can enter a value. And let me give you an example of just one quick example. I don't want to steal from our content in the more advanced videos, but let me give you one quick example that may help. Imagine that guitar amp sound, right? That low hum, that buzz that you typically hear when somebody unplugs or plugs into a guitar amp, right? It's a staple of every cheesy band movie. What you're hearing there is interference from the electrical power in the building. And in the United States, the electrical power, the alternating current, alternates at 60 cycles per second, or 60 hertz. In Great Britain, it's 50 hertz. And that's that low buzz. If you have some of that in a track and you wanted to eliminate it, and you know that's 60 cycle hum, I could come into my low frequency and I could manually set the value at 60 hertz there. And if I know that I want that reduced by a specific value, instead of clicking and dragging, which could be a little funky, I could just come in here and put -12. And I guess that was the wrong one to choose because it's shelving off. Let's try that one more time over here. We'll set this guy to 60. And we'll set it to, we'll enable him, and we'll set it to -12. That's a pretty big chunk. And then I want the Q very, very narrow because we only want to we want to punch that buzz out of the mix and leave the rest of it alone. So that's an example of if you know exactly what frequency you're going after, use the numeric input at the bottom to hit it very, very effectively, and then you can turn the whole thing off right there. And if you want to learn more about that, you should totally get the complete Cubase video because we have a whole bunch in there. But if you go to Wikipedia and you just Google like audio spectrum and stuff, you can very quickly figure out where, the fret noise in a guitar hangs out, or where the boominess in an acoustic guitar hangs out, and you can begin to get a sense of where you should boost and cut to equalize the overall sound of your performance. And then finally, to the right here, we have a compact version of what's down below in the mix console. So you've got obviously your gain control, your volume, mute and solo controls. The blue E is illuminated because we're in the channel settings editor, so it's active. And then read and write for automation, and your record, enable, and monitor. So this is the which we have. Oh, we don't have an input hooked up to it. That's why the little yellow speaker won't come on. And then, of course, the name of the track itself here. And yeah, I think you even get the ability to change its color if you wanted to. Yeah, look at that. Okay. So anyway, that's the basics of what's going on below here. Then in the top, probably most significant are these two arrows. You can move up and down through your project, right? So watching the track inspector, I'm sorry, not the inspector, the track list, obviously the highlighted track, in this case, the drums VCA, is what this is focused on. And you notice that everything disappeared in here at the moment. That's because a VCA track just controls other tracks. It's one of those utility tracks. It's not a creative track. So it doesn't have any, you can't EQ it because it's basically just a remote control for the other ones. But if I come down, if I use my arrow tools and I come down to the pad track, which is an instrument track, now suddenly I've got all of my strip stuff, my inserts, I've got all my channels, all of the creative stuff comes back. Okay. You can control the individual inputs and outputs. Here, this is, this one is coming from all your various MIDI inputs. If I change to an audio track, this would have our various microphones and buses set up. And then again, in our situation here, the only output routing available is the main stereo out. But if you were working in, say you had your studio set up for, you've got some stereo speakers, you've got some little crummy speakers for testing, you've got a mono speaker and then a surround setup, those would all appear here as different choices. What do you want to, which set of speakers do you want to play back on, right? And then you've got the output chain. You can put track presets on. We're going to talk about this at the end, how to use presets and all the different effects to help you get started quickly. But so I'll leave that till the end. And then finally over here, we've got some of your functions and then your setup and configuration windows. So this is going to set up the toolbar for what's shown, and this is going to set up your window layout. And really, it's just whether or not you want to see the output chain there. Like I said, in this case, the only output that we have is our main stereo out, and you kind of already see that at the bottom. But if for some reason you want the output chain displayed there, you can do that too. I know some people will get like a small side monitor, like in a 2-monitor setup, they'll get a little one, or an iPad off to the side, and just sort of leave the channel settings editor on that continuously. And I guess if you're using it that way, having the output chain there might be handy if you've got something else going on the main screen. But anyway, that's the basic tour of this, and with a few subtle differences. For example, on a MIDI track, the inputs switch from mics to MIDI channels. Audio track, the inputs are your microphones. But other than little stuff like that, this is basically the same control panel for all of your 4 primary creative tracks. Now, I mentioned to you that all of those strip functions there, so press the E again to get this back up. These guys, gate, compressor, all that sort of stuff. You can look at it here, which I think is much more efficient because I'm only working on one track at a time and I got everything right in front of me. But if you want that ocean of knobs, right, you can do that with the rack function as well. So the first thing that we're going to do is switch from our project window to, the first thing to get to that is to switch from this to maximize our mix console. And with anything in the lower zone here, you've got this little diagonal arrow that says open in a separate window, and it does like that. Now, at any time, if you hit the F3 key, so let me show you what I mean. If we're in the editor mode, and I want that in a separate window, I can click this, and then I get a much bigger editor. And the same thing if I was working on, say, my MIDI data, and I wanted to do full screen, I can do like so. And we're not going to get into chord pads and sampler control in this video. That's all incomplete. But same thing, you can break those out. But regardless of what's selected, at any time, if you hit the F3 key, you're going to get the mix console, which is sort of the traditional view. Now, this is a pretty messed up view because it's all massive sliders and massive faders, but there's no racks. That's what I want to get to, is that really cool ocean of buttons, racks. Why in the world? So let me walk you through some very common mistakes, or not even mistakes, but easy missteps when you're just getting your hands around the software, and especially if you're working in the light version. So I want my racks. I don't see them. The first thing you would probably do is come up here to the racks menu and go, aha, oh, wait a minute, they're all turned on. Maybe I should turn them all off. Well, that didn't do anything. I don't get it. Wait a minute. I remember Walt said in that video, click the gear icon, that'll help. And we can set it up however we want. So if we click the setup tool, we get this. You look through there and, well, it does say racks, but it's already checked. Maybe I should take that. Well, now it took the racks option away completely, and you start pulling hair out. So I got to be like this. So let's put our racks option back up there. And this can be really funky and frustrating. And I don't know why it defaults to this, but the button that you want is this guy, the setup window layout button. So it's the little gear. And if you click that, you can see, oh, there's all sorts of stuff that I could be viewing here, like my meter bridge, like the EQ curves, like the channel racks. There's what we're really after. If you had pictures and notepad data, you could pull that up as well. Channel latency, which is just this little line at the bottom that shows how many milliseconds of delay or latency a given track's introducing. And you have this, which is your channel selector. It's the left-hand view over here, which is actually handy because as you turn stuff on and off, here it drops out of the main window. So if you have a really big project with gobs and gobs of stuff, you can use this to turn off the ones you don't want to see. And it's only a visibility control. You could turn off all the drums here to clean up your display, and you're still going to hear the drums. It's not muting them. It's not deleting them. It's just not showing them to you. It's just to help you maximize your screen real estate. Okay, so what we're really interested in here are all the racks. And if you click on the top of a rack, they will begin expanding. And the one we're really interested in is the strip. There it is. There's our ocean of buttons that look like the picture from the first PowerPoint there. And what you're seeing is all the same controls. Let me see if this will work. Yeah, look at that. I can call them up at the same time. So on this given active channel here, I've got all the same controls displayed from top to bottom in this rack, right, that I do left to right in the channel settings editor. And for me, trying to maneuver up and down all of this is complicated. I've seen two guys that, and they happen to be both guys, two local folks that are using Cubase, that have their second monitor set up lengthwise. They got like two Dynex $70 TVs from Best Buy and mounted them on the wall, put them vertically, right? It's long ways, and they're tall enough that they can put the mix console on one and stretch it all the way out and see everything at once. Then the other one's all meters. It actually looks really cool. That's more eye candy than function, but I guess if you were set up that way, this would make a lot of sense, or more sense. For me, this is just kind of cumbersome, but that's how you get to it. The functionality is the same. If I move any of the controls for the tape saturation, for example, on the channel, the racks view, it's that control is going to move in the channel settings editor as well. So let me just point out one other thing. It would be cool. Wouldn't it be cool if you could get all of this control panel stuff in an actual hardware controller, just one at a time? Wouldn't that be something? Well, you can. Shameless plug. If you come to the hub menu, go to Hardware for Cubase, and select this, the CC121 controller, it's going to take you to this page, and this thing is worth every penny. I think they're about $600. I think the one that we have cost like twice that 10 years ago. But if you look at this thing up close, what you're seeing is it's given you an actual, I'm going to try to make that picture bigger for you. Well, you can go and look at this in detail on your own time, but it's given you all of the actual physical controls that are displayed in your channel settings editor. So you have all your EQ knobs, you have all of your channel strip controls, and the integration is seamless. The fader even moves up and down with the automation as you jump from, it's motorized, as you jump from channel to channel, it goes around. So it's a little bit of a luxury item, but it's worth every penny. If you ever use a CC121, you'll never want to be without one. So, all right, having said all of that, I think that shows you where the basic controls are that'll work for not only your audio track, but also your other four creative types. So we'll wrap this up here. That's enough to get you going. If you really want to dive in deep, Cubase Complete will take you there. And now we're going to pick up the next three are going to be how to edit MIDI and audio, just the basics, get you started. the fundamentals of how to pick out and put effects onto your tracks in your project. And then finally, how to mix it down once you have something here you want to send it out to the rest of the world. So we're going to do editing, effects, and mixing, and then our final chapter will be some best practices and tips and tricks and stuff like that. So we're almost there, folks, and I'll meet you right back here to start editing in just a minute.